4,000 years ago, kings did something modern governments call impossible. They erased personal debts, freed debt slaves, returned seized land. They called it a clean slate and used it for 3,000 years. Then we deleted the switch. Today, Americans owe $18.8 trillion, and our system can only add to the ledger. No reset. This is the machine you were born inside. Here's how it works, and why the ancient world kept hitting reset. The oldest recorded word for freedom in human history didn't mean free speech or free movement. 4,000 years ago in ancient Sumer, the word was Amargi, and it meant one specific thing: the cancellation of debt. Before humans had a word for liberty, we had a word for being released from what we owed, because debt came first. Before money, before coins, before banks, debt was never really about money. It's the oldest control system humans ever built, and once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. Now, the most common answer to a video like this is simple. Just be responsible. Don't borrow what you can't repay. Live within your means. It's a satisfying answer, and it's partially right, but here's the problem. Look at who actually gets crushed by debt across history, and most of them never signed anything. Entire peoples were born already owing. Farmers who never took a loan in their lives were taxed into debt by an empire that demanded payment in a currency they didn't have. Conquered nations were handed a bill for their own conquest. Whole generations inherited obligations decided before they were born. They did everything responsibly. It didn't matter because the force that puts people in debt isn't personal irresponsibility, it's structural. It's built into how power itself operates. The people telling you it's a discipline problem are describing the one version of debt you can control and quietly ignoring the machine that produced all the rest. Here's a useful test. If debt is only a personal choice, how can a person be born already owing it? So let's look at the machine. Here's what almost everyone gets wrong. We treat debt like it's math numbers, economics, something for accountants. The anthropologist David Graeber spent years tracing debt back to its origin, and he found that debt didn't grow out of money at all. It grew out of something far older: obligation. The simple human feeling that you owe someone, a favor, a gift, a sacrifice they made for you. For most of human history, that feeling had no number attached. It was just the invisible web that held people together. Then someone did something clever. They took that feeling, "you owe me," and attached a number to it. And a number changes everything. A favor can be argued about. A number feels like a fact. You can't negotiate with a fact. You can only pay it. That is the exact moment debt stopped being a relationship and became a weapon. So how does a number control people without a single chain? Think about what chains actually cost. A guard, a wall, force. Someone has to watch you every hour forever. It's expensive, it's fragile, people escape. Debt needs none of that. Because once you believe you owe something, you guard yourself, you show up, you comply, you stay quiet. Not because someone is standing over you, but because a voice inside says, you have to make this right. That's the genius of it. The most powerful control system in history doesn't need a jailer. The debtor becomes their own jailer. And it feels moral. Paying what you owe feels like being a good person. So the system doesn't just control you, it makes you feel virtuous while it does. But this creates a problem. The same problem in every civilization that ever ran on debt. And it's the problem that Switch, I promised you, was built to solve. Hold on to that. We're almost there. Here's the problem. Debt always grows faster than people can pay it. Interest compounds. Harvests fail. And slowly, more and more people fall into debt they can never escape until so many are trapped that the whole society becomes unstable and cracks. The economist Michael Hudson put it in one blunt line: debts that can't be paid won't be paid. The only question is how: through revolt, through collapse, or through a decision. The oldest civilizations chose the decision, and this is the switch. In ancient Mesopotamia, a new king taking the throne would do something that sounds impossible today. He'd declare a clean slate, all personal debts cancelled, debt slaves freed, land seized as collateral returned. Hammurabi did it, his successors did it, again and again for centuries. The Greeks did their own version. In 594 BC, Athens was so close to civil war over debt that they handed one man, Solon, emergency power, and he wiped the debts and outlawed debt slavery outright. They called it the Seisachtheia, the shaking off of burdens. Even the Bible built it in. The Jubilee, every 50 years, debts forgiven, land returned. Leviticus 25. This wasn't charity. It was engineering. The ancient world had learned, the hard way, that a civilization drowning in unpayable debt destroys itself. So they built a reset and pulled it on a schedule for 3,000 years. And where there was no reset, watch what happened. In early Rome, if you couldn't pay, you didn't just lose money, you lost yourself. It was called nexum, debt bondage. Your own body became the collateral. Free citizens worked as slaves by the people they owed. It got so destabilizing that Rome was forced to abolish it around 326 BC, just to keep the Republic from tearing apart. Now travel east to Ming China. In 1581, a sweeping reform called the Single Whip Law rewrote how the empire collected taxes. For centuries, peasants had paid in grain, the thing they actually grew. Now they had to pay in silver, but peasants didn't grow silver. To get it, they had to sell their harvest, and because every farmer in a region was dumping grain at the same moment to meet the same tax deadline, the price collapsed exactly when they needed the money most. Merchants who controlled the market set the terms. In parts of the late Ming, rice worth half a measure of silver was counted by tax officials as only 3/10, so a farmer had to sell 50% more grain just to cover the same bill. And then came the surcharge. Officials demanded extra silver to cover melting losses when they recast the peasants' coins into official ingots, a fee that routinely ran 20 to 30%, most of it vanishing straight into their own pockets. A tax you can only pay in a metal you don't produce, priced by the people who profit from your desperation. That isn't a tax. It's a debt machine with a calendar. Miss one season, borrow to cover it, and the land your family had farmed for generations belonged to someone else. Same machine as Rome's nexum, a human being slowly converted into what they owed, running 1,000 years later on the other side of the world. Look at the world you actually live in. Americans now owe a record $18.8 trillion in household debt, nearly 147 trillion of it in student loans taken by people before they understood what compounding was, over $1 trillion in credit cards, charging an average interest rate above 21%, rates that would have been called usury in almost every century before ours. Here's one number that should stop you cold. Since 2010, Americans have paid more than $2 trillion in credit card interest alone. That is more than the entire student loan debt of the country. Paid, not toward what anyone borrowed, but toward the interest on it. And here's the switch I promised you at the start. It's gone. There's no clean slate anymore. No jubilee, no ruler who takes power and wipes the board. The single tool every ancient civilization used to survive its own debt, we quietly abolished. We built a system that can only ever add to the ledger. It has no reset at all. Think about that. The Sumerians 4,000 years ago, with none of our technology, understood something we've forgotten with all of ours. A society where debt only grows and never resets is a society running at a wall. You were born into that system, and no one ever showed you the design. So here's the pattern underneath all of it. Debt was never really about money. It's the oldest method humans ever found to make each other obey, without force, without chains, without a guard. Attach a number to a feeling, make the person believe they owe, and they'll do the rest to themselves. Empires understood this, kings understood this, and somewhere along the way it stopped being a tool used on enemies and became the water all of us swim in. You can't step outside the system, but you can stop being blind inside it. Because the person who can see the pattern moves through the world very differently from the person who can't. The chains were never physical. They were always accounting. If you've ever felt like you were paying for something you never agreed to, drop the word Amargi in the comments. It's the oldest word for freedom we have, and almost no one alive has heard it. Now you have. The pattern was always there. Now you can see it.